Archaeologists uncovered this pillar during an excavation near the entrance to present-day Jerusalem last winter. The column is here in the Israel Museum's Second Temple Gallery. It's the newest treasure in the exhibit from the time of Jesus. The inscription reads, Hananiah bar Dudalos mi Yerushalayim. Hananiah, the son of Dudalos, from Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, surprisingly for us, is inscribed the same way we write it today and the same way we pronounce it today, Yerushalayim. And it's the first time we have an inscription of this sort from 2,000 years ago, from the times of the Second Temple period.
Senior curator Dodi Mevorach says the name Yerushalayim exists on coins from the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans in 70 A.D. Those coins had a political agenda, while this inscription does not.
Here, there is no agenda. It's just an artisan from a potter's village stating his name, his father's name, and stating that he is not from the village, but originally he comes from the big city, from Yerushalayim, Jerusalem.
This site was a pottery workshop that started to develop at the end of the 2nd century before Christ and continued to the 2nd century after Christ.
During the excavations, workers exposed the foundations of a Roman structure. One of the supports was the pillar the Romans had reused. It bore an Aramaic inscription in Hebrew letters typical of the time of Herod the Great.
I saw the column with the inscription. It wasn't clean, but I could recognize some letters, and I saw that it's in Hebrew.
Archaeologist Danit Levy of the Israel Antiquities Authority oversaw the excavation.
I was really excited. My heart went so fast, and I think all the people that was around me could hear it.
The site is about 4.5 miles from the old city, which would have been Jerusalem at that time.
So we now know, in a very simple manner, that Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, was called Shalem, Yerushalem, and Yerushalayim at the same time, which we didn't know before. It's just another piece of a mosaic of how we portray the past.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem.
Tel Shiloh, the site where the Jewish tabernacle and the Holy Ark were located between the Israelite conquest and the building of the temple in Jerusalem, yielded an unusual clay pomegranate in an excavation this year. In the Bible, the pomegranate is a common temple decoration.
He made pomegranates in 2 rows encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars. He did the same for each capital. Each pillar was 18 cubits high. The bronze capital on top of one pillar was 3 cubits high and was decorated with a network and pomegranates of bronze all around. The other pillar with its network was similar.
And small pomegranate decorations hung from hems of the robes of the priests.
Make pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn around the hem of the robe, with gold bells between them.
In 2014, ISIS blew up the shrine of the tomb of the prophet Jonah in the Iraqi city of Mosul. The now destroyed Muslim shrine had been situated on a mound, where archaeologists soon found the remains of a palace of the Assyrian king Esarhaddon. The king's name is referenced in inscriptions discovered in tunnels ISIS dug into the mound, as the group searched for artifacts to sell on the antiquities market. The Old Testament references Esarhaddon when discussing the assassination of his father Sennacherib, who was the king who ravaged much of Hezekiah's kingdom of Judah and unsuccessfully besieged Jerusalem.
So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. One day, while he was worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with the sword, and they escaped to the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon, his son, succeeded him.
Esarhaddon himself reigned from 681 to 669 before Christ. Information archaeologists discover in the remains of his palace will tell us more about the latter days of the kingdom of Assyria than of the time of Jonah, who lived almost a century earlier and whose actual final resting place is unknown. Biblical history intersects multiple times with the history of writing, as illustrated by an inscribed piece of limestone discovered in 1995 in a tomb along the west bank of the Nile at Luxor. University of British Columbia Egyptologist Thomas Schneider has deciphered the letters and announced this year that it is in ABC Del Re, a very early version of the Semitic alphabet in ABC order. The excavated tomb dates back to 1450 before Christ, the time of Moses, according to the biblical chronology. It suggests that if Moses wrote down everything the Lord had said, he wasn't the only one writing in a Semitic script in Egypt at that time. A Canaanite tomb excavated at Tel Megiddo in 2016, and announced earlier this year, has revealed new information about the inhabitants of one of the most famous and important ancient cities in the region. At the original announcement last March, archaeologists marveled that the 3,700-year-old tomb was still intact and unlooted, yielding the remains of a man, a woman, and a child, all adorned with gold and silver jewelry. From the tomb, archaeologists expected to learn much more about the Canaanite culture that existed in Israel during the time of the patriarchs. And, indeed, it was reported that residue in one of the jugs from the tomb was discovered to be vanilla, which was not thought to have been known nor used in that part of the ancient world at that time. The finding illustrates the robust spice trade of the ancient world.
אני מחזיק בידי משקולת מאוד מאוד מיוחדת שנמצאה בסינון האפר פה בעמק צורים. האפר הוצא מיסודות הכותל צפונית לעיר דוד, באזור קשת רובינסון, ומשם האפר הגיע לפה לאזור הסינון פה בעמק צורים. המשקולת הזו מתוארכת לתקופת בית ראשון, ועל המשקולת יש כתובת של המילה בקע. המשקולת, בקע, המשקל שלה הוא מחצית השקל. בקע לגולגולת, מחצית השקל. כשהיו מביאים את מס מחצית השקל למקדש, בתקופת הבית הראשון, לא היו מטבעות, ואז הם השתמשו בביצעי כסף, בחתיכות כסף, ואז היית צריך לדעת את המשקל האמיתי על סמך המשקולת הזו שנמצאת בידי. משקולות הבקע בתקופת בית ראשון הם ממצא מאוד 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 נדיר. אבל המשקולת הזו עוד יותר נדירה, כי הכתובת שמופיעה עליה היא מופיעה בכתב ראי, כלומר שהאומן שחרט את הכתובת על המשקולת הוא אומן שייצר חותמות. כי אנחנו יודעים שחותמות נכתבו בכתב ראי, במקום לכתוב אותה כמו שצריך, הוא כתב אותה כמו שהוא רגיל לכתוב בחותמות, כלומר הוא התבלבל. התנ"ך, הממצא, קרוב למקדש שלמה, צפונית לעיר דוד, יסודות הכותל, הכל מתחבר.
We are standing now below the level of the Western Wall Plaza, between two walls of the 7th century BCE. We were here for 5 years, digging slowly from the level of the Western Wall Plaza to bedrock. During the restoration, everything that was in between the stones was taken out in order to put modern cement. We found a very small item, a docket. A docket is a small piece of clay that was impressed with a seal and afterwards fired. On the docket, there are two male figures standing one opposite the other. And below them, there is an inscription in ancient Hebrew script that says, Lesar Ha'ir, belongs to Sar Ha'ir, which is the governor of the city. In the Bible, there are few governors that are mentioned by names, and also governors of Jerusalem are mentioned. Yoshea, the governor of Jerusalem in the days of King Hezekiah, and we have Maaseiah, that was the governor of Jerusalem in the days of Yoshiyahu. It's very important because it proves it's not only in the Bible, but there really was a governor of Jerusalem around the late First Temple period. This docket adds to the find of 7 seals that we found here, carried the names of Netanyahu ben Yaush, Chagav, Yedayahu, Usha, and more, and all together tells us that in this quarter where we stand right now, the high administration of Jerusalem probably lived towards the end of the First Temple period. The investigation has just begun, and I'm sure that we are going to study much more about this specific docket and other finds from the Western Wall Plaza in the near future.
In December 2015, Jerusalem archaeologist Elat Mazar announced the discovery of an ancient clay seal, or bulla. The bulla contained an astonishing inscription. It read, "Belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah." This tiny artifact carried a sensational message. This seal proved the existence of one of ancient Judah's greatest kings, and proved the accuracy of the biblical record. Dr. Mazar didn't know it at the time, but another bulla bearing an intriguing inscription was waiting to be placed under her microscope. The Old Testament record shows that King Hezekiah was a contemporary of Isaiah the prophet. The biblical books of Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah show that this prophet played a central role in Hezekiah's remarkable reign over Judah. Today we have indisputable scientific evidence proving the existence of King Hezekiah. But what about Hezekiah's chief counselor and one of the Bible's greatest prophets? Is there archaeological evidence proving the existence of the prophet Isaiah?
Now, the bulla of King Hezekiah was part of a assemblage. It didn't come by itself. First, we published King Hezekiah's bulla. That was the first thing. But then we studied the whole assemblage. And the whole assemblage contains more than 30 bullae. And one of them attracted our special attention. We were very skeptic at the very beginning. We didn't jump on the idea. It says Yeshayahu. Okay, fine. This is quite a common name. And then it says Nun Bet Yud Navi, which is in Hebrew, if you just listen to that, Navi, it's a prophet. So, wow, Yeshayahu the prophet. This is, and then you have something nearby, which is Chizkiyahu, King Hezekiah, near the prophet Yeshayahu. What fantastic. But then we needed to study it very carefully.
The Isaiah bulla was uncovered in 2009 during a small archaeological excavation on the Ophel. The Ophel area is located adjacent south of the Temple Mount and has furnished numerous important artifacts since it first began to be excavated in 1968. The Isaiah bulla was discovered in an area adjacent to what archaeological evidence suggests was a royal bakery from the First Temple period.
The debris that we were excavating is just below us. So where King Hezekiah bulla was found, just below here, where Brent is standing, and then the whole assemblage was spreading all over. So we first published this one, and then worked on the other bulla just as well as on figurines and other important items. And just on the other side of this, the same assemblage, just on the other side of that Herodian wall that was disturbing that assemblage in its middle, that we found another bulla that is of Isaiah.
The bulla is small and can be divided into 3 zones or lines. The challenge when studying the Isaiah seal is that part of the bulla is missing and part is damaged. The damage was caused by a finger pressing against the soft clay when the seal was first created almost 2,700 years ago. You can still see the fingerprints. The fact that part of the seal is missing does not affect its interpretation. This is because the missing section is inscribed with an image or motif and not text. Dr. Mazar believes it was the image of a grazing doe, symbolizing prosperity. The text on the second line reads, Yeshayahu. Although one letter is missing, there is only one viable option for the identity of the missing letter. It can only be the Hebrew letter Vav. So the text on the second line is indisputable. It reads, Yeshayahu. This is the Hebrew word for Isaiah. But is this Isaiah the prophet? The text on the third line is incomplete due to the damage sustained to the bulla's left side. 3 letters can be deciphered, however, and together they read, Navi. Archaeologist Reut Ben Aryeh has studied the bulla and explains why the missing letter is most likely an aleph, making the second word Navi, or prophet.
Among all the bullae from the excavation in the Ophel, we found this one. In its middle field, there was the name Yeshaya. So it was very exciting to read in its lower field the letters Nun, Bet, Yud, which suggest the word Navi, prophet. But there were 2 problems with this suggestion. First, the word Navi is usually written with the letter Aleph in the end. Second, most of the time in Biblical Hebrew, titles after private names appear with a definite article, the, and we don't have that in our bulla. So it was more reasonable to say that it is a private name, Novi or Novai, that is known from the Bible and also from epigraphic findings. But by examining the bulla, I noticed that the borderline is seen only on its right edge and not on the left edge, which means the impression is not complete. If we continue the borderline, we can see that there is a space for 2 more letters in the middle register and for 1 letter in the lower one. Usually there is no empty space in the seal, so it makes sense to insert the letters Vav, Hey, and Aleph, and to suggest that this bulla was impressed by the seal of Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah the prophet.
While the presence of an aleph is possible and even likely, there are other interpretations. Professor Shmuel Achituv is an expert epigraphist and suggests Navi could refer to a place or surname.
It belonged to Isaiah, but that's all. Because it says Navi, Nun Bet Yod, which means Navi, but it lacks the Aleph. Perhaps Navi is to be pronounced Novi, Novai, or something else. Then that's a citizen or town of Nov. But of course, it can't be Navi, prophet. As I said, the lack of the Aleph. When we, in modern Hebrew, when we pronounce the name Navi, you don't feel, you don't hear the Aleph, but it was felt, it was pronounced.
Although there are other explanations, the weight of evidence strongly indicates that this is the seal impression of Isaiah the prophet. Consider, first, it is indisputable that this seal is inscribed with the Hebrew name for Isaiah. While this name was undoubtedly common in ancient Judah, it is rare for an individual to have his own private seal. Only important officials or royalty bore their own private seal, so whoever this Isaiah was, he was important. Second, the position of the text in relation to the outer edge of the bulla suggests that there is space in which added lettering would almost certainly have existed. Third, consider too that there are only three potential options for the identity of the missing letter in Navi. The most logical and the most natural explanation is that it was an aleph. With an aleph, the word Navi means prophet. Fourth, and most importantly, consider the archaeological context in which this bulla was uncovered. The Isaiah bulla was uncovered at the same time as the Hezekiah bulla, in the same location, in the same assemblage, and in exactly the same strata of soil.
What are the chances that we have just a name of somebody, Yeshayahu, and his some family name is Navi? It can be, but it's kind of imaginary. Really? These two bullae of these two people that were so closely together described in the Bible are found in the same layer, just 1 meter at a distance from each other. The same context, the same layer. So it strikes very clearly that we're talking about the same two people. And to think it is not this person, it's another Yeshayahu, and his name is Navi, which is a prophet in Hebrew, okay, missing the aleph still, it can be there, and his name is Navi, the family name is Navi. It's a not only imaginary kind of, it seems like it can't be.
Consider what the biblical record says about the relationship between King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah. 2 Kings 18 and verse 5 says that Hezekiah was Judah's greatest king, second only to King David. But the books of Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah also reveal that the key to King Hezekiah's success was his remarkable relationship with the prophet Isaiah. There are 15 occasions in the Bible where the names Hezekiah and Isaiah are mentioned in the same verse. Whenever King Hezekiah faced a crisis or needed counsel, he turned to the prophet Isaiah. And the prophet, inspired by God, guided King Hezekiah and all of Judah through the crisis. This was one of the most remarkable king-prophet relationships in the Bible. When you consider this seal impression in the context of biblical history, how likely is it that a seal impression discovered within a few feet of the Hezekiah bulla and inscribed with the name Isaiah belonged to a man other than Isaiah, the prophet? You can read Dr. Mazar's article on the Isaiah bulla in Biblical Archeology Review.
This discovery might have shot to the top of the list, if there was some way of identifying who the statue head depicts. But there's no name or inscription. The best clue to his identity is the band around his head, suggesting a crown. This tiny 2-inch sculpture was found in 2017 at Abel Beth Makkah, a site near the border between Israel and Lebanon, but caught the public's attention when it was placed on display at the Israel Museum last summer. It dates to the 9th century before Christ, so it could depict a king of the northern kingdom Israel, such as Ahab or Jehu. But just as easily it could be King Hazael of Damascus or King Ethobel of Tyre, the father of Jezebel. The name of Pontius Pilate, the Roman procurator, who interrogated Jesus and then ordered him crucified, has turned up for the second time in the archaeological record. The first time his name and title were found engraved in a stone discovered in 1961 in secondary use at Caesarea Maritima. Scientists announced that a seal ring excavated in the late 1960s at Herodium, a desert palace just outside of Bethlehem, also carried the inscription. Epilates, The inscription on the badly corroded ring was finally read using advanced photographic techniques. The copper alloy ring was probably not fancy enough to have actually been worn by Pilate. It was more likely worn by someone who was authorized to act on Pilate's authority, and who would use the seal to create official communications.